what is great, I mean, what I said to the boys, and, it was quite obvious, once they were on the show.
When asked on the Diary of a CEO podcast what his darkest day had been, Cowell responded simply, "The whole time was dark." He paused, then clarified, "Not thinking I want to take my own life, but thinking if something terrible happened, it wouldn't bother me." Everything in his world had lost its meaning, until perhaps his son changed that entirely. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. From here, the story deepens into a poignant tableau of human fragility and redemption. It is more than a tale of a celebrity opening up. It is a deeply evocative journey of a man clawing his way back from emotional oblivion, guided by the radiant love of a child. When Simon Cowell's mother passed away in 2015, it wasn't just a personal loss, it was a devastation that shattered the core of his emotional well-being. Despite his external success, he found himself numb, trapped in a relentless cycle of work, exhaustion, and existential void. "I lost everyone," he said. "I lost my parents. It's finality now." Everything just meant nothing at that point. In that void, Simon formed a near-obsessive devotion to work. He described himself as becoming a vampire who worked through the night, waking late, and isolating himself from the warmth and rhythm of normal life. The irony of fame and fortune stood in stark contrast to his internal desolation. Outwardly powerful, inwardly fading, this duality shaped his emotional breakdown. "I was very successful, but I wasn't happy. I really wasn't happy," he admitted, painting a vulnerable portrait of exhaustion and emptiness. But then came the call, a question pregnant with destiny. The kind you only ask if what you're about to say changes everything. Lauren Silverman's words came softly, yet tremulously. "Are you sitting down?" It was an introduction to the news that she was expecting. And for Simon, this announcement became the pivot of his life. It changed everything. "It made me happy again." His son Eric was born on February 14th, 2014. And from that moment, he became not just the apple of his father's eye, but the catalyst for redemption. Simon admitted that the first time he saw Eric's scan, his heart simply surrendered. "That is it. I'm besotted." The scan, the faint blur of an unborn life, held an enormous promise. That love, fierce and unconditional, could anchor him back to reality. Fatherhood for Simon was alchemic. It turned grief into gratitude, emptiness into emotion. He remembered watching The Jungle Book with Eric for the first time and realizing that the unfiltered wonder in his son's eyes mirrored his own childhood awe. It was like, "Oh my God, I remember how I felt when I saw The Jungle Book," he confessed, his voice soft with memory. Eric didn't just fill his father's days, he remade them. Simon described how every decision now took Eric into account. The relentless pace of work slowed, coffee-fueled nights gave way to tender mornings. He found satisfaction in simple things. Watching Eric discover the world, making him laugh, being there for bedtime stories and park outings. Grief's sharp edges dulled under the simple, joyous presence of a child he adored. Even today, the emotional resonance remains strong. When Simon talked about nearly quitting smoking, he credited Eric. He described how his son's disapproval, watching him sneak a cigarette, catching him behind hedges, worked like a tiny, persistent teacher. "Thanks to you, I've nearly quit," Simon admitted. That little boy had become a guardian of his father's health, physical and otherwise. Simon's transformation extended to his appearance, too. He once admitted to overindulging in Botox and fillers until his then 8-year-old son's horrified laughter jolted him back to perspective. That reaction triggered a change. He stopped using those treatments entirely and shifted his focus to healthier habits. "There is no filler in my face at all now. Zero," he declared, crediting his son's unintended honesty for that moment of clarity. As Eric grew, so did the bond, becoming a storybook love made real. They teamed up to co-write a children's book series called Wish Fits, weaving whimsical tales about imaginary animal creatures together. It wasn't just a literary collaboration, but a testament to creative communion. Father and son, co-founders of imagination. Public appearances offered glimpses of their closeness. On red carpets, Simon looked for two small eyes, his barometer of joy. Is he having a good time? He often asked himself. and often Eric was alight with pure, unfiltered excitement. Those moments, Simon said, were the best because through Eric he felt alive again, unguarded and real. In March 2025, Simon watched a drum performance on Britain's Got Talent by a contestant born without arms. Moved to tears, he turned to the cameras and shared, "My son has just taken up drums and he is going to watch this over and over again." Something in that statement echoed, a father's pride softened by awe, mirrored onto his son's unfolding journey. In interviews, Simon has called Eric the best thing to ever happen to me. Watching him change day by day, learning, growing, being, offers Simon a focus that no accolade or contract ever could replace. At one point, he admitted he didn't even understand a baby's nature until Eric taught him. At 20 months, when they began to communicate, Simon said, "That was magic." Beyond the sentiment, there is a deeper narrative underway. The story of Simon Cowell and his son is not just the story of a celebrity opening up, but of fatherhood as rebirth. Simon's ascent in the entertainment world was fueled by ambition, by critique, by a fierce wanting. Now that drive has softened. His wants are simple: to be there, to guide, to laugh, to create memories with a son who commanded so much of his heart. Simon's words echo this softening. "Every decision I make now, I am thinking about Eric." The hyper-driven man of TV is now grounded by fatherhood. He has built a new world, one where tenderness matters, vulnerability is strength, and the love of a child becomes the greatest force of healing. It is a story that resonates because it reminds us that even those whose names are on marquees, whose faces are in lights, carry wounds, and that love, when it arrives at the right time, can be both compass and cure. Simon Cowell's journey shows that from the brink, the light of a child, sweet, curious, uncompromising, can draw you back to the essence of what it means to be human. It began with a quiet sense of alarm, one that no parent ever wants to face. In late 2020, Simon Cowell was navigating the aftermath of a serious biking accident. A crash that left him with a broken back and undergoing a 6-hour surgery to insert a steel rod into his spine. In the aftermath, as he convalesced at home, his vigilance over his young son's health intensified, particularly amidst the global threat of COVID-19. On talk radio, Simon admitted it. He was terrified at the idea that he or little Eric might catch the virus. He spoke of wearing masks while cycling, carrying volumes of hand sanitizer, and confronting the painful fragility of parenting during a pandemic. Those days of uncertainty only heightened his protective instinct toward his child. The ripple effects of such a health scare are profound. It wasn't just that Simon recognized the weight of vulnerability. The accident and subsequent months of recovery seemed to shift his priorities. With a fragile newfound respect for time and safety, he started cocooning family life in routines that felt sacred, and any sign of danger, illness-related or otherwise, was met with proactive alarm. Fast forward to November 2023. A report surfaced suggesting Simon had implemented a radically new schedule. Not for convenience, but for connection. Fridays became sacrosanct. He stopped working after 5 p.m., refrained from reading emails at night, and insisted on early dinners and happy hour movies with his boy. This wasn't about leisure. It was intentional devotion. It was as though parenthood had provided him with a schedule that prioritized emotional health over deadlines. Such routine adjustments are telling. They speak of more than a shift in work-life balance. They reveal a man deeply attuned to the fragility of moments with his son. In the years following his spinal injury, the alternative felt unacceptably steep, life without fully living it. In spring 2025, Simon offered a glimpse of his ongoing parenting complexity, broadcast and screens encroaching further into our lives. While speaking on ITV's This Morning, he voiced a fear that many modern parents share: his son gaining access to a cell phone. Simon admitted he was petrified at the thought. The concern wasn't just about screen time, it was about premature exposure to content on the internet. He had grown up in a time when growing up happened slowly in stages, and he wanted that same pace of innocence for his son. Here again, Simon's words reflect a modern tension, balancing the undeniable benefits of technology with an instinct to shield one's child from its underbelly. That worry, the kind that keeps a protective parent up at night, is part of the emotional weight he shoulders as a father in the digital age. Meanwhile, the public had been watching. In August 2025, Simon decided to share a rare unscripted moment, posting a photo of Eric nestled in his trailer alongside family pets. The brief caption, "Everyone's happy." It was simple, but it was poignant. In that instant, Simon allowed a sliver of his private life into the public sphere, a gesture of good faith to fans and friends who cared quietly but deeply. It was a window into their ordinary but cherished togetherness. There's a subtle artistry in how Simon navigates privacy and visibility. For over a decade, he has kept his son just out of frame. But perhaps these little exposures are perfectly measured, the right amount of connection to humanity, while still preserving sanctuary. Philately meets philanthropy, and Simon's personal fears often find public purpose. Years ago, he became a patron of Together for Short Lives, an organization dedicated to children with life-shortening and life-threatening conditions. Having witnessed the courage of families facing unimaginable odds, Simon's commitment grew into something enveloping, something personal. The experience changed him internally, not just as a public figure, but as a man who knows that parenting can be about making moments matter when time is so finite. Through the years, Simon has witnessed intimacy's healing power, in the form of routines, of humor like the hysterical laughter from a young Eric when his dad overdosed on cosmetic fillers, and in conscious, loving resistance to the pressures of fame. He's allowed moments of notebooks, of drum aspirations, of tattoos of the ordinary, to define his priorities more than contracts or critiques ever could. And through it all, his love for Eric retained an unfiltered clarity. His son wasn't afflicted by illness. Rather, in a metaphoric inversion, Simon's own emotional wounds found healing in the presence of a boy who taught him to slow, to feel, to protect, to step back from the glare. So in this next chapter, concern over illness, over safety, over screens, there lies a portrait of evolving fatherhood, not heroic or dramatic, but vigilant, not performative, but tenderly real. Simon Cowell's journey with his son isn't about spotlight moments. It's about the invisible ones. The night spent masking up before a trip, the fear in a voice when considering a smartphone, the serenity captured in a fragment of an Instagram trailer snapshot stating everyone's happy. It's in how he schedules early dinners not because of fatigue, but because of love. It's in daily choices, pushing away the excess of work, stressing balance, prioritizing what matters most. There's a generational echo here. From a father who once lost his own path after losing his parents, to one who today fights daily to guard his child's well-being. In a world steeped in hyperbole, there is poetry in Simon's restraint, and in every thoughtful, protective moment laid quietly between father and son. The narrative of Simon Cowell's transformation as a father is not only personal but also cultural, revealing how the archetype of the tough, uncompromising television judge softened when confronted with the fragility and joy of raising a child. In the early 2000s, Simon was widely recognized as the sharp-tongued face of American Idol, where his biting critiques often reduced contestants to tears, but also built his reputation as someone unwilling to sugarcoat the truth. What the public didn't see then was how personal grief and inner turmoil were quietly shaping him behind the cameras. The birth of his son and the growing awareness of family health challenges around him altered the essence of how he related to the world. In interviews over the last decade, Simon has repeatedly described the strange duality of success, that reaching the heights of fame did not offer the satisfaction he had always assumed it would. His mansion, his fleet of cars, the power to shape pop culture, all of it seemed hollow when weighed against the absence of family after the loss of both parents. That vacuum meant that when Eric entered the world, Simon recognized almost instantly that this child was not simply an addition to his life, but the emotional anchor he had been missing. But parenthood is never simply a matter of love, it is also a matter of worry. Simon has spoken candidly about the anxieties that come with raising a child in a public-facing family. He has acknowledged the fear of paparazzi intrusion, of internet exposure, and of the risks attached to a celebrity child being thrust into attention before they are ready. He described once how important it was for him and Lauren Silverman to establish boundaries. Eric would not be a public mascot for their brand of fame, but rather a child with his own privacy, his own right to grow without the constant weight of his father's notoriety. The practical implications of this philosophy are everywhere. For years, Simon avoided bringing Eric to live shows, knowing that the roaring crowds and intense lights could overwhelm a young child. He once recalled the first time Eric did visit a taping of Britain's Got Talent. At first, Eric was wide-eyed, nervous about the noise. Simon, sitting at the judge's table, could see his son looking uncertain in the audience. Without breaking his focus on the show, Simon felt his parental instincts flare. His role as a judge suddenly secondary to the simple hope that his son would feel safe and happy in that moment. Later, Eric adjusted and even grew to enjoy the performances, but the memory lingered for Simon as a reminder of how differently he now measured success. Health concerns, too, became central to Simon's fatherhood journey. After his own devastating spinal injury in 2020, his perspective shifted profoundly. He had always been cavalier with physical risks, enjoying fast rides on e-bikes and maintaining late-night schedules that ran counter to the rhythms of most families. But lying in a hospital bed recovering from surgery, he admitted that his first thought was of Eric. How vulnerable a child would feel seeing his father incapacitated. The sense of guilt was sharp. He vowed then to prioritize not only his recovery, but also his longer-term physical well-being, because to him, being present for Eric's milestones was not negotiable. The rehabilitation period after his accident was grueling, but Eric's presence turned it into a shared project of resilience. Simon recalled that his son, only 6 at the time, would encourage him with small phrases. "Come on, Daddy, you can do it." The simplicity of those words gave him strength. He began to view exercise, physiotherapy, and lifestyle adjustments less as personal chores, and more as acts of love toward his son. What might have felt burdensome under different circumstances became meaningful because they were intertwined with the responsibility of being a father. Equally significant was Simon's decision to overhaul his diet. Previously notorious for a fondness for indulgent foods and irregular meals, Simon changed to a plant-based diet, later describing the process as one of necessity rather than vanity. But more than his own health, he connected this lifestyle shift to the example he wanted to set for Eric. He realized that children absorb not only spoken lessons, but also the patterns of their parents' lives. If Eric saw his father consistently making unhealthy choices, that message could ripple into his own decisions. Thus, Simon reframed health not as an individual pursuit, but as a parental duty. Parenting also reoriented Simon's approach to discipline and authority. Known for being blunt and uncompromising in the professional sphere, Simon surprised even himself by discovering gentleness in his parenting style. He described Eric as hilarious, stubborn, and sweet. Qualities that often disarmed him when he tried to enforce rules. Yet he found balance, learning to correct without crushing spirit, a far cry from the no-nonsense persona audiences were familiar with on television. He has admitted that Eric wraps me around his little finger, but also that fatherhood has taught him patience in a way nothing else ever could. Simon's concern over technology and screen exposure adds another fascinating layer. In a world where even young children often have access to smartphones, he has openly admitted to being petrified at the thought of Eric growing up too quickly through the internet. This concern is not simply about the dangers of online predators or inappropriate content, though those are real. It is also about preserving childhood innocence in an age when digital devices threaten to erode imagination. Simon has spoken of wanting Eric to enjoy books, outdoor play, and face-to-face friendships before the inevitable tide of technology takes hold. In doing so, he reveals himself as a father grappling with modern dilemmas faced by millions, despite his celebrity status. Beyond the home, Simon's philanthropic endeavors also intersect with his fatherhood journey. His support for charities dedicated to children facing life-limiting illnesses illustrates a deep empathy. Having experienced his own emotional darkness after the death of his parents, he now channels compassion into supporting families grappling with medical crises far greater than his own. The contrast is poignant. Here is a man who once seemed defined by harshness on television, now deeply engaged with vulnerable children and parents navigating unimaginable challenges. His relationship with Eric also reshaped his view of legacy. Whereas once his focus had been on career achievements, discovering talents, shaping music trends, securing television dominance, his ambitions today include leaving behind a personal imprint that his son will cherish. He has openly discussed writing books with Eric, not merely as commercial projects, but as artifacts of shared imagination. Their co-authorship of the Wish Fit series illustrates this beautifully. Whimsical animal hybrids brought to life, not in a boardroom, but at a family table where a child's imagination met a father's storytelling instincts. The creative collaboration reveals something essential about Simon's evolution. Fatherhood hasn't muted his professional drive, but redirected it. Rather than chasing the next record-breaking talent show, he increasingly finds satisfaction in projects that center his son. He once joked that Eric is his boss, dictating not only their routines but even the kind of stories they create. Beneath the humor lies a truth. For a man once consumed by control, learning to yield has become one of his most important lessons. As Eric grows older, Simon's anxieties shift from physical safety to emotional resilience. He has acknowledged that he worries about how fame might shadow Eric's adolescence, particularly when comparisons to his famous father inevitably arise. Simon has resolved to shield him from these pressures as much as possible, even if that means restricting his own openness about family life. He recognizes the paradox. His career thrives on visibility, yet his parenting requires discretion. Walking this tightrope requires constant recalibration. Another dimension that has deepened since Simon became a father is his reflection on mortality. He has admitted to once believing himself nearly invincible, living without much thought to the future. Parenthood shattered that illusion. Now he thinks often about what kind of world Eric will inherit, what values he will carry, and how prepared he will be to face challenges long after Simon is gone. This awareness has driven Simon not only toward personal health improvements, but also toward a more environmentally conscious lifestyle. In interviews, he has linked his dietary changes and his interest in sustainable living to Eric's future, suggesting that personal choices are also a form of stewardship. In public moments, Simon sometimes surprises fans with emotional candor when discussing his son. During one season of Britain's Got Talent, after watching a performance by a young contestant overcoming disability, Simon confessed that he wanted Eric to watch the clip over and over as an example of resilience. The statement resonated widely because it revealed the softer undercurrent of his parenting philosophy, instilling values of perseverance, humility, and gratitude. Privately, Simon has admitted that bedtime routines, something he once might have dismissed as trivial, are now sacred. Reading stories, tucking Eric in, and sharing conversations at the end of the day are, to him, the most fulfilling moments of fatherhood. They remind him of the childhood rhythms he once took for granted and lost too early with the death of his parents. Recreating them for his son feels both redemptive and grounding. It is telling that Simon frequently uses the word saved when describing Eric's impact. The notion that a child could save an adult is countercultural in many ways, yet in Simon's case it feels deeply authentic. He does not suggest that Eric fixed everything, but rather that fatherhood gave him a reason to rise each morning with purpose. The health scares, the professional ups and downs, the emotional lows, all became survivable because they were reframed through the lens of being needed by his son. The broader significance of Simon's story lies in how it challenges stereotypes. The archetype of the stoic, wealthy, powerful man is often portrayed as self-sufficient and emotionally distant. Simon's openness about fear, vulnerability, and transformation complicates that image, offering an alternative narrative of masculinity, one that embraces caregiving as strength. His story suggests that fatherhood, with all its anxieties and responsibilities, can be the most transformative project of a lifetime. Even in lighter anecdotes like Eric teasing his father for botched cosmetic treatments, there is an underlying lesson about humility. Simon has acknowledged that his son's honest reactions keep him grounded, reminding him that external appearances are fleeting compared to the enduring value of authenticity. For a man once consumed by appearances in the entertainment industry, this grounding influence is no small feat. Looking ahead, Simon has expressed hopes for Eric's future that are surprisingly modest. He does not dream of him inheriting the entertainment empire or becoming a star. Instead, he hopes his son grows into kindness, curiosity, and independence. "Whatever he wants to do, I'll support him," Simon has said, underscoring that his role is not to impose ambition, but to nurture individuality. This approach reflects another shift, from building empires to building character. Simon has learned that the most enduring legacy will not be a television franchise or a record label, but the values instilled in his child. He often cites laughter as one of the most important aspects of their bond, noting that Eric's sense of humor can dissolve the day's stress instantly. Joy in its purest form has become his compass. The story of Simon Cowell and his son is therefore more than a celebrity anecdote. It is a parable of transformation. It speaks to the ways grief can hollow out a life, how fame can mask emptiness, and how the arrival of a child can restore meaning in unexpected ways. It illuminates the profound health concerns that shape parental instincts, from fear of illness to awareness of mortality, and it showcases how even the most seemingly invulnerable figures are, at their core, shaped by the same worries, joys, and responsibilities that define parenthood everywhere. And as Simon himself continues to navigate the challenges of fatherhood, protecting Eric from digital overexposure, fostering his creativity, ensuring his health, he reveals that the truest measure of success is not ratings or revenue, but resilience, presence, and love. And one of the subtler aspects of Simon Cowell's evolution as a parent has been the way fatherhood influenced his creative eye. For decades, his instincts as a producer were shaped by what would sell: chart-topping singles, memorable personalities, and spectacles that could capture ratings. But with Eric in his life, Simon began to recalibrate what he considered meaningful entertainment. He started speaking about how he judged contestants not only for technical skill, but for the emotional resonance of their performances. He described how watching with the eyes of a father changed his perspective. Instead of imagining what would impress the industry, he thought about what might inspire a young child sitting on the sofa at home. That shift was profound, nudging his focus from commercial success to emotional impact. This change also bled into the kinds of projects he chose to pursue outside of traditional talent shows. While Cowell once prioritized programs with high drama and cutthroat competition, he gradually began nurturing ideas centered around storytelling and family-friendly creativity. The Wish Fit series with Eric was part of that, but so too were his comments about wanting to create content his son could be proud of watching. It revealed a quieter ambition, not simply to be remembered as the judge who shaped pop culture, but as the father who brought something whimsical and uplifting into the children's imaginations. Eric's presence also reshaped how Simon navigated celebrity culture. In the past, Simon leaned into the persona of the villain judge, unafraid of negative headlines or sharp criticism. But once his son became old enough to recognize media narratives, Simon admitted to being more conscious of how his image might reflect on his family. He spoke about how children process things differently, often literally, and how he wanted to avoid Eric being hurt by sensationalism. This awareness drove him to temper some of his harsher public comments and to reveal more of his warmth in interviews, traits audiences had rarely seen during his earlier television career. An unexpected benefit of this evolution was that fans also began to see Simon in a new light. Viewers who once loved to hate him found themselves charmed by his openness about fatherhood. Social media reactions shifted from critiques of his bluntness to admiration for his honesty about vulnerability. In a sense, Eric's influence helped humanize Simon for an audience that had long associated him only with icy wit. Simon has also spoken of the spiritual dimension of becoming a father. While never one to discuss faith publicly, he has hinted that Eric's arrival felt almost like destiny, as though his life had been nudged onto a more purposeful track. He described the feeling of watching his son sleep or hearing his laughter as moments of transcendence, tiny reminders of something larger than himself. For a man so often defined by the transactional world of entertainment, this openness to awe and wonder marked a dramatic turn. The legacy of Simon Cowell's bond with his son is still being written, but already it offers a case study in transformation. He is a figure who once embodied cynicism, recalibrated by the innocence of a child. And in that recalibration lies a lesson that extends beyond celebrity, that sometimes the deepest changes in health, perspective, and purpose come not from fame, fortune, or accolades, but from the quiet, everyday love between a parent and child. One aspect that often goes unnoticed in Simon Cowell's transformation is how fatherhood changed his relationship with time itself. For much of his career, time had been a commodity to be maximized, squeezed into relentless filming schedules, meetings with record executives, and international travel. After Eric's arrival, Simon began to treat time less as something to exploit and more as something to savor. He once described how slowing down to watch his son build Lego models or experiment with drawing was as fulfilling as closing $1 million deal. These seemingly ordinary moments became treasures, because they reminded him that the most valuable experiences were not measured in ratings or contracts, but in memories that could never be replicated. The presence of a young child also sharpened Simon's sensitivity to the future. He began to talk more openly about wanting to make the world less intimidating for the next generation. His involvement in conversations about education and youth creativity, for example, was fueled by the realization that Eric would inherit a rapidly changing world. Simon expressed curiosity about how to encourage resilience in children who might one day face challenges far more complex than those of his own upbringing. This wasn't a political statement, but a parental one. an acknowledgement that his son's health and happiness were linked to the health of society as a whole. In many ways, Simon's story illustrates the paradox of fatherhood, that it is both humbling and empowering. For a man once celebrated for control and authority, discovering joy in surrender, surrendering time, ego, and even aspects of identity has been a revelation. Through Eric, Simon found that true strength lies not in domination or perfection, but in presence, patience, and the willingness to grow alongside one's child. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Simon Cowell sharing his son's health struggles? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.